Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be assessing our kick through, which is a transitionary movement, quadruped, being able to thread leg through both sides. It's going to apply some rotation through the spine, but primarily I want to look at stability of the shoulders, feeling how the scapula really grounds to the rib cage and how our hands ground to the floor. So we're going to go through an assessment to start with. Then we're going to go through our movement series, and at the end we're going to come back and reassess. So at the very beginning, when we're assessing the kick through, I want to go slowly to make sure it's not painful. Slowly, I think is the word I said. And I really want to feel the quality of the movement. How smooth can you go from one side to the other? Is there a difference when you're on your right hand compared to when you're on the left hand? Try to sink it into your body so that at the end of the session, when we come back to it and you're reassessing, you can feel the difference. Did it improve? Do you feel more grounded? So, with all that, let's get started. So we're going to start in a quadruped position, spreading fingers nice and wide, grounding palms and extending elbows fully. Toes are lightly tucked, and we're going to lift knees just a little bit off the floor. First thing is I just want to make sure that this is comfortable. It's not painful on the wrists, not painful on the shoulders. As we're in this position, I want to start to slightly rotate hips, letting both knees turn to the left, and then slowly turn to the right. And notice how your hips rotate changes the weight distribution of your hands. As your hips rotate towards the right, you're going to feel weight move to your left hand and vice versa. As we're getting into that, you can start to slightly lift that hand to make sure that your shoulder feels nice and stable. I want to make sure it's not painful. I also want to make sure that we're not collapsing into that shoulder as you rotate. And if you're able to do all that, the next part is we're going to thread our bottom leg through. Can we come back, transition smoothly to thread the other side through? Again, I want to feel the quality of the movement. I'm not going to the extreme ends since we haven't done a whole lot of movement yet. I want to keep it slow and small. By the time we get to the end, if your shoulders are feeling more stable, we can start to expand that kick through into some other interesting positions. All right, so we're going to start. I'm going to kind of come up to it standing. I want to do some spread hands work. We're going to spread our hands as wide as possible, extending elbows fully. And I want to spread so wide that I feel some light stretch strain in between my knuckle space of my hand and all the way out to the fingers. And I want to maintain that throughout this next movement series. So we're going to do some kind of bowls of soup, but I want to do so from a low angle. Hand, arm, shoulders down. We're spiraling palms as wide out as we can, and then rotating them inward as far as we can. I want to keep the elbows actively straight, not letting them get passively bendy. And I want to feel this spiral all the way up to the shoulder. I want to feel that shoulder, the humerus spinning around in the shoulder socket. And as you're doing this, notice if one side feels different than the other. I've been experiencing some shoulder pain. As I externally spiral, I have more stretch through the anterior compartment of my left shoulder than I do on the right shoulder. Next, we're going to bring our arms up to our normal bowls of soup, reaching straight out to the side, still spread hands. And instead of moving both together, I want to alternate. I'm going to spiral one hand internally forward as I'm externally spiraling the opposite hand. And then alternate, going slowly to make sure there's no pain. I have a little discomfort in that left shoulder as I inwardly spiral in this position. I have some impingement in that shoulder. I find that this movement tends to help relieve that impingement. And it's actually considerably better today than it was a week ago, but I've still got some stuff to work out. As we're going back and forth, we can start to allow the shoulders to roll over the rib cage a little bit. Going back and forth, start to let it move your upper body so it's kind of contorting and twisting. I want to think like from fingertip to fingertip, I am a wet washcloth. And I am trying to wring out that washcloth through the forearms, elbows, all the way up to the shoulders, even a little bit to the base of the neck. And we'll shake our hands out. We're going to come down to the floor, and we're going to get into our wrist mobility. So keeping those hands spread as wide as possible, grounding palms. With those spread hands, see how much surface area of your hand you can make connection with to the floor. That includes the palms, the fingers, and the knuckle spaces. I want to try to prevent having any of that, like a knuckle that's kind of popping up. Can you ground fully throughout the hand? From here, we're going to just lightly rock forwards and backwards, loading into the wrist space and comparing the right wrist to the left wrist. Noticing if there's more tension, if there's discomfort. I would definitely want to make sure we're not moving into pain. Now, since I've got some discomfort in my left shoulder, I'm kind of checking in with that left wrist. And it is a little bit different. It doesn't hurt, but I definitely feel the difficulty in kind of grounding to the outside of my hand. Fourth and fifth fingers, the raise of those fingers as well, just a little less grounded, which kind of connects with what I'm feeling in my shoulder. Next, we'll turn fingers out, and we're going to move side to side, getting into our nice side to side glide. Grounding palms. This is where I want to kind of feel that connection between the palm of my hand and my shoulder blades. Feeling that nice slide and glide of the shoulder blades along the rib cage. And this is a good place to really start to make that connection between the palm of the hand and the shoulder blade. The more active your hand is, the more grounded your hand is to the floor, the more grounded your shoulder blade is going to be to the rib cage. And this is kind of an important thing to take notice of, because I want really good grounding to the rib cage. That's going to help make a stable shoulder. Turning fingers next all the way back towards the knees. The closer the hands are to the knees, the less intense. The further out we come, the more intense. And from here, keeping the palms grounded, we're lightly rocking back hips to heels. And again, feeling into the wrist space, noticing the difference on the right side compared to the left side. It is not unusual for the more dominant hand to be a little denser than the non-dominant hand, but I still kind of want to take note of any differences between the sides. And I definitely also want to kind of take note of anything that I might be feeling in the elbow space. I want to avoid pushing it into pain, but if there's a little bit of like a juicy nature stretch there and there's some elbow discomfort, I definitely want to work into the juicy nature of that stretch a little bit, because it's going to have some relationships. Next, flipping the palms upside down to the back side, allowing the elbows to bend to start with. This can be an uncomfortable position on the back of the wrist, so I don't want to move into pain. And from here, grounding into the back of the palm, we're extending the elbows as much as you can without pain, and then allowing them to bend. As we extend the elbows, I anticipate for most people there's going to be a little bit of a stretch specifically in that elbow space. If there is, I want to move into the juicy nature of that stretch. I don't want it to be a massive stretch. I want it to feel kind of good and juicy, and I want to move in and out of it. By keeping it light and juicy, you may know that the joint space gives you starts to relieve and gives you a little bit more range of motion. If you're able to extend the elbows fully without locking, then you can rock back hips to heels. Again, I want to make sure that we are not moving into pain. And then we'll come off the wrists, We're going to roll them out a little bit, get a little flow to them. I do want to make sure that we avoid doing too much, being on the wrist too long if they start to feel stressful, because we will get a little bit more wrist time later in the class. So now I want to focus on our feet, getting the feet a little bit mobilized. So we're going to tuck our toes. I want to specifically focus on the big toe. We're going to rock, allowing our hips to sit back into our heels. Feel the weight of your hips load into the big toe joint. And take a couple of breaths in and out. I don't want to be forceful here, but as you inhale, you're kind of like a buoy in the water. As you inhale, it's allowing you to float up. As you exhale, it allows you to sink, and I want to feel the weight of the hips. Sink a little deeper into the big toe joint with each breath, and see if you can feel that big toe joint. If there's some stretch related to it, you may get a lot of stretch more in the medial arch of the foot, which is fine. That's going to be congruent with the big toe. And we'll start to rock, allowing our weight to come forward, and then exhale, letting our weight sink back, hips to heels. With each one, we're seeing if the hips will sink a little deeper. And as we're doing this, I want to start to notice, how does the right big toe feel related to the left big toe? Is one side stiffer, achier? Is it painful? Is there less range of motion? On the next one, as you come up, I want to turn the heels all the way as far out as you can so that you're tucking the pinky toes. And we're going to do the same rock back, but now we're loading pinky toes, the hips into the outside edge of the foot. And again, with each one, feeling the difference on the right side compared to the left side. Kind of mapping tension in the foot, how it is on the right compared to the left, is so super valuable. It's important and valuable, especially when there's pain in the body. So I want to, and keeping the foot mobile is really important as far as keeping the foot functional. On the next one, as we sink back hips to heels, I kind of want to stay sunk, not super deep, but just nice and juicy. And from here, we're going to do some windshield wipers with the heels, allowing the heels to roll all the way in and all the way out. And seeing, again, comparing, how does this feel on the right foot compared to the left? Does one side feel clunky compared to the other? Does it feel smooth? Is there more restriction? Are you able to go as far? As you're bringing your heels in, can you notice any differences on that big toe of the right big toe compared to the left big toe? That big toe is such an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to movement. If you got imbalances at the big toe, that can create all kinds of issues upstream of the body. So I definitely want to take good notice of the big toe space. All right, so next we're gonna stand up and grab our staff to do a little bit more shoulder mobility. I want to take a shoulder width grip. Elbows are actively extended. I don't want to let my elbows get soft and bendy. And I want to imagine that we're trying to break the staff in two. Now I want that breaking or bending of the staff to not just be at the hands, but I also want it to be at the elbows. Feeling those elbows spiral, and also feeling it at the shoulder blades. So as the elbow pits spiral upwards, feel the shoulder blades kind of going from rounded up to packing down towards the hips. With all that nice active bending of the staff, next is adding a little scoop of the pelvis. So I want to tuck the pelvis a little bit so that we're a little funky tucked under position. And from here, we're going to see how far can we pull those active elbows back towards our ears, nice and slowly. Exhale as you squeeze. Inhale, allow the hands to come forward a little bit, and then exhale and squeeze. We can do about 10 up to 20 of these. With each one, you're seeing if you can squeeze just a little bit further. Now, as I'm pulling my elbows back, part of the reason I got my pelvis scooped is I want to avoid having my rib cage jut out and stick out to where I get this big curve in my back. I don't want to get big sway in the back. So that scoop in the pelvis will help keep your rib cage locked down, which will put more focus at the shoulders specifically. Next, we're going to bring the staff behind the back, actively reaching down. Still want active elbows, and I'm still bending the staff, but I'm bending it away from the body. So I have that nice spiral through the elbows, which kind of naturally draws the shoulder blades down. It also naturally opens and extends the chest. So you should feel some light opening stretch of the chest. From here, we can bend forward at the waist. And then we're going to lift elbows up towards the ceiling. Squeeze on the exhale. Inhale, soften. Exhale, squeeze. And with each one, see if you can lift just a little bit higher. Again, 10 up to 20 reps are good on those. And then we're going to flip our palms the opposite direction. So now my palms are facing forward, but I'm still trying to bend the staff away from the body. So I still feel the elbows spiraled out, still feel the chest open and extended. Everything else is the same. Bent at the waist, squeezing elbows up to the ceiling on the exhale. Again, I want to also work on comparing that left side to right side. Do you feel more tightness, tension in that left shoulder compared to the right shoulder, or other way around? We're going to go ahead and set our staff to the side, and now we're going to come down to the floor, and we're going to get into our shin box position. So I am starting on my left side shin box. My left leg is in front. I'm bringing my left hand down just outside of my hip to help ground through that palm. And I want to spiral my elbows outward. So I'm turning my elbow pit as far out as I can to feel that spiral all the way up to the shoulder, similar to our bowls of soup. I'm just spiraling out. Feel that open up the chest, lifting the sternum up to the ceiling. And I kind of want to lock into this position a little bit. I don't want to allow my upper body to move a whole lot because I want to put my focus in the hips. And if I move a lot in the shoulders and the upper body, it takes away from my work at the hips. I can't feel my hips quite as well. So from here, my back knee, where it's touching the ground, that inside of the medial part of the knee, I want to think of that point as a pivot point. And I want to push into that pivot point in order to extend my hip forward. Really, I'm reaching my hip bone as far forward as I can to see if I can feel kind of a light stretch through the front of the hip. On the inhale, we're going to let the hip soften. On the exhale, we're driving into the floor, reaching that hip forward. Something to note is the hip, this back hip, has to be off the floor in order to move. So if you're trying to keep it touching the floor and do this movement, you're not doing the movement. So I want to let that hip be off the ground, reach forward. With each one, we're trying to reach a little bit more forward. And as you extend forward, start to notice if you can feel your glute contract. Can you feel that tightness in the butt? Inhale, let it soften. Exhale, extend more. I don't want to intentionally squeeze the glute. I don't want to activate it with my brain. I want to activate it through the movement. So the more you move that hip bone forward, the tighter that glute's going to feel. And that's what I want you to experience. Move forward. How tight can you feel that glute get? Then we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, grounding that palm, spiraling the elbow, feel that chest open up. And again, kind of locking down the upper body. Finding that knee as the pivot point, and then reaching that hip bone forward. On the exhale, inhale, letting it soften. Now, right off the bat, you're going to notice if there's a difference on this side compared to the other. Is it tighter, more restricted? Can you go as far? My left hip is significantly tighter in this range of motion. It's fairly common, and that's going to be a lot related to having 5 knee surgeries on my right knee, 1 knee surgery on my left knee, as well as a lot of other injuries along the way. So a lot of what I'm doing here is not just trying to regain a little bit of range of motion in this hip, but it's also trying to prevent this hip from getting worse over time. So again, as we get that extension, feeling into that juicy stretch, can you start to feel your glute contract? With each one, we're seeing if we can move a little further without going into pain to see if we can get a little bit more squeeze in that glute without actually consciously squeezing it. I want to come back and note, I'm not rotating with my upper body right now. I'm only moving that hip bone forward. So if you notice that your chest is turning, see if you can lock that shoulder down and only allow that movement to happen at the hip. We're going to go ahead and switch back to the other side. Again, locking down that palm, spiraled elbow, open chest. And now we're still focusing on that back hip. We're going to lift that knee up towards the ceiling, rotating over the foot, seeing how high can you bring it, and then you're going to bring it all the way back down. We're going to exhale as we squeeze. Inhale as we bring it down. I want to make sure I'm going slow in my movement. I don't want to throw my knee up here because I want to really be able to feel softly into this hip socket. And this is a good place to just notice how far can you go? How high can you squeeze that knee, and how does it feel? What does the tension, tightness, and restriction feel like deep in that hip socket? Then we'll bring it across to the other side. Again, locking down palm, spiraled elbow, open chest, and then opening that back knee. And again, I want to get that comparison. This particular, my anterior hip compartment on my left hip is tighter than my right. I have a little less range of motion. I'm not going quite as high. This is congruent with the previous movement that I had tightness in the front of the hip. This is a fairly common pattern for my body. But as I'm going through it, each one squeezing into it, I get just a little bit more range of motion. And the big thing is it's moving a little smoother. It feels better by the last one than it did by the first one. And we're going to come back to the other side. And now we're going to get into our folds. Now, real important with folds, I only want to move as far as I can without pain. And whatever I can get without pain, I want to, this is a really important movement as far as opening up some of that glute space. So if I can go anywhere in this movement, I want to make sure that I'm working this range. And using the knee as the arrow, I'm seeing how much can I keep my sternum square with that knee, and how much can I reach both hands through that knee. Exhale as I reach. As soon as I get as far as I feel comfortable, taking a nice breath in. On the exhale, reach a little further without going into pain. On the next inhale, we're going to come all the way up, and we're going to move across to the other side and do the exact same thing. Squaring the sternum, reaching the sternum through the knee, and then reaching the hands through the knee. On that exhale. Nice inhale, exhale, and reach a little further. And we're going to go back and forth on this. We're going to spend a few minutes going back and forth on this. This is a great hip mobility. Simply going from one side to the other. We're working a lot of different things in the hips, as well as getting this nice length and stretch through the glutes. So I want to kind of go back and forth a few times just to sink the movement in. And I want to get 2 or 3 reps or rounds back and forth before I start to come back to my comparison. As I'm coming back to my third time, now that I've mobilized the movement a little bit, as I get into my reach with a nice exhale, I want to feel into the glute space of the leg that's in front. And I want to compare it to the opposite side. Does one side stretch more? Am I able to reach as far? Does it feel different? Is one side uncomfortable compared to the other one? This is a really important movement to be able to compare one side to the other side. I also want to pay attention to how does the back hip feel? Because we're going to start changing our position of our shin box, and that's going to put different patterns of load into that back hip. As we're coming back to our starting leg at this point, now I want to start to open up my knees a little wider, spreading out our shin box position. I'm no longer worried about the front knee as the arrow, and I'm just kind of getting a nice forward fold. The fold can come straight forward. It can still go out towards the direction of the arrow of the knee. It can even come back beyond the knee. You got some area in which you get to explore at this point. But whatever I do on one side of the body, I want to make sure I'm also doing on the other side of the body so that I can compare the positions. When I get into this side of my body, when I open up this back hip, I feel that left hip significantly more on one side than I do on my right hip on the other side. Again, that's a fairly common pattern in my body. So it's not something I'm necessarily trying to fix, as it's something I'm working to continue to maintain, to manage. With each one, we're going to continue to open up that back leg more and more until we get closer to what we would call a yoga, like more of a yoga class pigeon pose. I'm not concerned with the end range pose. I'm more concerned with how smooth I can move from one side to the other and making sure that the fullest expression that I am able to get of this movement is not painful or stressful to my body. I want to feel good, non-painful movement, which means I need to know where good, non-painful movement exists. If I'm continuing to move into pain, I'm creating a distortion of what good quality movement should feel like for my body. And as you're getting into those more opened up ranges with the pigeon, that's also going to kind of get more, start to get more angles into that glute. So you should be able to really start to get a good sense of how does the right glute feel compared to the left glute. Is it tighter, and in what positions is it tighter? Is it tighter with the knees closer together? Is it tighter as you get more into that more classic pigeon pose? All right, so we're going to come back to the starting position of our shin box with our palm grounded to the floor. And now we're going to work a little bit of spirals through the shoulder. And this is kind of an assessment of side body bracing, like can you reach through that arm and brace out to the side? This is going to be important when it comes to doing that kick through movement. It's also really important as far as good shoulder stability. If we lose that ability to brace and extend those hands out to the side, that's going to be a significant loss of shoulder function, and it's going to show up in important places such as shoulder impingement. So again, I'm on my left side, left hand is grounded to the floor. My elbow is actively straight, but I'm going to start playing with my hand I got my nice spread hands. I'm going to spiral that spread hand over my pinky, like I'm lifting my thumb, keeping the hand spread, but I'm spiraling from palm side down to the back of the hand down, okay? I just want to play with that a little bit. And as I do that, notice how as you spiral up, your elbow has to bend. And it kind of bends in a way that drops it towards the floor. That's what the area, so I want to kind of play more in that area. As we're spiraling up, as you feel that bend, allow the elbow to come down and kiss the floor. As it kisses the floor, I want to feel a little bit of load into it, making sure it's not painful. Notice I'm only on my pinky on my hand, and then I'm going to spiral the hand back down as I press and extend the elbow. I have a little bit of load on my hand, and I want to go back and forth, dropping the elbow down, and then grounding back through the palm, extending the elbow. Again, I want to make sure that this is not painful. I'm starting out on my weaker shoulder. This is a little bit challenging. It's not painful, but it feels, it's actually harder than it feels like it should be. Now, the next thing we'll do is as we drop down the elbow, I want to continue to spiral the palm all the way so the palm side is facing up. But as it's doing so, I want to drop the rest of my shoulder to the floor. Now, before we do that, this gets into where if we have some shoulder function issues, then this can be a little challenging. So we can use our other hand to brace, and I can use my other hand to take a significant amount of load, upper body load, off my outside shoulder. I can do this without my shoulder at all. I can tap my shoulder down, only pressing through my outside hand. Okay, so I can absorb a significant amount of load in order to work the range of motion on my shoulder without putting a lot of load directly into the shoulder. So use that other hand as much as you need to in order to move the shoulder through this range of motion without loading it too much. This is mostly important if you have some shoulder pain issues. I want to go through the movement non-painfully. That's what's important here. So outside hand there to support. As we spiral the palm up, elbow comes down, and we're going to continue to spiral the palm all the way, and we're going to allow our shoulder to come down and just lightly tap the ground, and then we're going to spiral the palm back up as we extend into the elbow, and then all the way back up to the hand. So there's a nice spiral action taking place through the palm to bring the elbow to the floor, continues to spiral as we bring our shoulder to the floor, and then spiraling the opposite direction as we push through the elbow into the floor and then eventually push into the hand. Let's go ahead and switch to the other side and do the same thing. So again, starting with that nice grounded palm, spiraled elbow. First thing we're going to start with is just spiraling the palm to the outside of the pinky of the hand, keeping the hand spread, feeling the elbow bend, and then spiraling back. I'm not actually bringing my elbow to the floor yet. We started out by just feeling how spiraling the hand caused the elbow to bend. As you start to feel that action, now we can continue to spiral and drop the elbow down. Feel a light load through that elbow, and then press back out, extending that hand. Now, if you're starting on the stronger, if you started on the weaker shoulder like I did, then this side probably it feels a little bit more, a little bit stronger, right? If you started on the stronger side and you're now on the weaker side, this may feel a lot more challenged. So again, we can bring that outside hand to the floor to support. As we spiral to the elbow, I can keep as much weight in that hand as I need to. We're going to continue to spiral the palm in order to bring the shoulder to the floor, and then spiral back to elbow, and then all the way out to hand. Now, since this is my strong shoulder, I can load this shoulder pretty well without using my other hand. I want to inhale as I'm coming down, spiraling to the floor, and exhale as I'm spiraling out. Now, if you're finding that there's a significant imbalance between these movements, that is a good thing to notice. That is a good discovery, because this is something we want to program into our movement regularly, because I want to have better balance through these areas of shoulder stability, because that's generally what's going to help with whatever pain is taking place in the shoulder. Feed the areas where you're lacking will help to stabilize the whole structure. All right, we're going to lay on our back, bringing our knees up off the floor. Knees are going to be about 90 degrees. Hips are a little bit less than 90 degrees. I got my hips kind of tucked in just a little bit in order to help keep the low back somewhat flat to the floor. Next, we'll let our arms go out wide with the palms up. This is where I like to imagine we're laying on a bed of sand. And I want to make this really perfect imprint of my head, neck, upper back, shoulder blades, arms, elbows, wrists, and hands. Like I got the perfect imprint in the sand, and I don't want to smear that imprint at all. So I'm kind of pressing down into the floor and making sure that nothing in that upper body moves. And from here, we're very slowly going to start rocking our hips or rolling our hips. I'm lifting one hip up over and rotating across the body, but I'm making sure that I don't smear any of the sand. Inhale as we come to center, and exhale as you rotate. The slower you go on this, the better. If you're going fast, it is impossible to not smear the sand. As you're going side to side, first thing is I want to make sure that we are not moving into pain. It's part of the reason we are moving slow. And as we go, we can slowly start to move a little bit further. And notice if you're able to rotate a little bit more to the left side than you are to the right side, without that lifting of a shoulder or a hand, without smearing any sand. This is a really important movement to assess. We're looking at lumbar rotation in relationship to thoracic. And if you can rotate your lumbar more in one direction and not in the other, that is going to impact gait mechanics quite significantly. And so I definitely want to notice those imbalances so that we can work on those imbalances. All right, we'll let our legs come down flat to the floor. So straight legs. We're going to bend bring one foot flat to the floor, so we're bending one knee, and then we're going to move that foot out to about 45 degrees from the midline of the body. From here, I want to make sure that we have a tripod foot. So tripod foot being ball of the big toe, ball of the pinky toe, and heel. If my knee needs to be placed directly over my heel in order to maintain a tripod. If I let my knee turn in, it's going to pick up the pinky toe. If I kick my knee out, it's going to pick up my big toe. So all throughout this movement, that knee's got to be placed directly over the heel in order to maintain that tripod foot. Start with this leg. So from here, nice flat foot. we're gonna drive that knee straight down into the floor, and by doing so, it's going to lift your hip up to the ceiling, and then let it soften. On the next one, as you drive, you're lifting that hip, you're moving your hip bone up to the ceiling to feel that light stretch at the front of the hip. This is similar to what we did in the shin box, the first shin box movement. Pushing through the inside of the knee, kicking the hip bone forward. Guess what? We're gonna feel that glute start to contract as well. So I wanna feel that extension leading into a nice solid glute contraction. While you're doing this, tune into the opposite leg. That opposite leg should be soft and relaxed. It should not be pushing down, lifting up your opposite hip. The entire opposite side of your body is completely relaxed. You're only firing one side. So if you feel that other leg active, if you feel your heel pushing down into the floor, see if you can let that go and only work one side of the body. Moving into that nice stretch in the front of the hip, feeling that glute contract. And then we're gonna switch and do the same thing on the other side. Again, finding that nice flat foot, knee over heel, driving down, feeling that extension of the hip and that mild contraction of the glute. Now, this is a good assessment for glute function because we're looking at balance one side to the other. So if one leg feels different than the other, that's going to be some indications of some type of imbalance through the glutes. It's not generally the glute's fault. It has a lot to do with mobility of the joints. If you can't get your joints in certain positions in which your glutes need to function, your glutes aren't going to function. And it's not because of the glutes, it's because of the lack of a movement and mobility available for them to be able to do their job appropriately. Some things that you may notice that will be an important awareness of glute function. Does one leg feel really solid and connected and grounded? And does the other side, does the knee feel a little shaky? Does the foot not quite ground fully? It's hard to feel that tripod. You know, shaky knee is going to be a real good indicator of some imbalances in the glutes. We're going to switch back to the other side, doing the exact same thing, pressing the hip bone down, driving that hip up. But we're going to add, opposite arm is going to come softly overhead. It can come out to the side if it needs to. As you drive that hip up, keep driving. We're taking our free hand and we're going to reach across the body and rotate. I don't want to lose my knee. I'm still driving down through my tripod foot as I reach and exhale. Inhale, I'm bringing it all back to center. Exhale, drive the hip up, and then reach across the body. As we're doing this, as I reach, I don't want my hand, the reach of my fingers, to lift my foot off the floor. If anything, I want to add more downward pressure through my foot as I'm reaching across. You can think about this as your spine is a wet washcloth and we are wringing out the spine. We're trying to get counter movement through the hips from the thoracic. And we'll go ahead and switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, starting with driving that hip bone up, opposite hand comes softly overhead, and then reaching across the body. Inhale as you come back to center. Exhale as you drive that hip bone up and reach. This is an important place to really notice that knee. If that knee is turning in as you're reaching, you're losing your pinky toe. You're no longer grounded through your foot. So that knee has to stay straight down, which is going to restrict how far you're able to reach with your fingers. That's kind of the point of the movement. I'm less concerned with how far my fingertips go. I'm more concerned with maintaining that grounded foot. And really, as far as I reach with my fingers, I want to then repress, ground through that foot. Again, wringing out the spine. You may notice that how much more that activates the glutes. That's a good thing. That's what we want. All right. So now we're going to get into an inverted position. This will be another series that we're going to get into the wrists a little bit. So if you got to take breaks with wrists, especially since we've done a fair amount on our wrists so far, it's okay to get off the floor, wring them out, get some flow back into them, do whatever you can. I don't want to irritate the wrists at the expense of working on the shoulders. So we're grounding palms around the hips. If you find that your torso is long and your arms feel short, it's okay for your hands to come back a little bit. But I want to keep my hands as close to the hips as possible. And I want to make sure that we are grounding fully through the palms and not just through the forefingers or the forepalm. If it means that you get a wedge or a blanket or something that goes underneath the heel palm in order to maintain a grounded connection through the whole hand, that is fine. So from our grounded palms, I want to allow the elbow pits to internally spiral. So notice how that rounds shoulders forward. And then we're going to spiral the elbow pits outward. And we're going to notice how that opens up the chest, kind of helps lift the sternum up. Feel those shoulder blades kind of start to pack down and back. I want to move back and forth through that. Internal spiral, feel the shoulder blades roll up to the ears. You can feel that nice stretch through the upper back in between the shoulder blades, and then press down as you externally spiral. Feel the chest open up and push to lift the sternum up nice and tall. Inhale as you internally spiral. Exhale as you externally spiral. And we can add a little bit of, actually I want to change my breath on that, but I'll change that in just a second. We can also add in the pelvis. As you internally spiral, start to scoop the pelvis a little bit. We're doing an inverted cat-cow. So I got this nice stretch between the shoulders. And we also feel a little bit of stretch through the low back. And I want to inhale as we open up and press down. Inhaling, bringing breath into that belly space. Exhale, drawing navel into spine as we let the pelvis scoop. Shoulders round up to the ears. See if you can go from feeling a nice big stretch across the back to feeling a nice big stretch across the chest. And this is a good place to kind of notice, how does it feel right side to left side? Do you have more tension through the right shoulder than you do through the left shoulder, or vice versa? As you're spiraling out on the next inhale, I want to maintain that lifted, spiraled position of the shoulder. So nice open chest, spiraled out, well-grounded palms, and we're going to bring in a little neck mobility. You're welcome to change your foot position at this point. You don't have to keep them out in front. You're welcome to cross them as long as you're maintaining that grounding through the shoulders and the hands. We're going to start with just checking our blind spots. Looking over the right shoulder, and then looking over the left shoulder. Nice squeeze as you look over your shoulder. I like to use my nose and chin as like an arrow, and then the ridge of my shoulder as my measurement. How far can I turn my head over my right shoulder compared to my left shoulder, so that I can kind of pay attention to the range of motion. Do I have more range of motion to the left or right? This is real important, especially if there is shoulder pain or an issue of shoulder scapular instability, impingement, all these things, wrist issues. I want to check in with the neck. There's going to be a neck relationship in these areas. With each one, we're trying to squeeze just a little bit further into that end range without forcing it. My left side of my neck, I have less range of motion to my left, and it's a little bit tighter. Next, we're going to come back to center, and we're going to do some very shallow windshield wipers, allowing the ear to lightly drop to one shoulder. I don't want to let my head just completely fall to my shoulder. This is a very light drop. I just want to feel a little bit of traction stretch through the side of the opposite side of the neck. Come back to center, same thing on the other side. Just enough to start to feel the difference in tension right side and left side. Next, we're going to add to it. So as you drop an ear, imagine you got a piece of string attached to the other ear that's pulling you up towards the ceiling. So I want to light drop and then lift, come back to center, opposite side, light drop and lift. I'm actually actively pressing down as I actively lift through that ear. See, and I want to be soft with this, not forceful. I'm trying to get a nice juicy stretch through the side of the neck. And really what I want to do is compare. How does the left side feel in relationship to the right side? My left side is it's noticeably, I won't say significantly, noticeably got more restriction to it. Which is a good thing for me to notice because it's actually a little bit different than it normally is. So I kind of want to take notice of any kind of changes on a day-to-day basis. That's part of the reason I do a daily movement assessment, is because every day my body might feel a little bit different based on how I moved the day before. So last for neck we're going to do is just some shallow neck rolls. Let the head drop forward. I'm not dropping it all the way. I don't want to put a lot of tension stress in the neck itself. So I'm going from head forward, letting the right ear roll towards the right shoulder. Again, I'm staying shallow. Then letting my gaze move up to the ceiling, and then left ear to left shoulder, and then chin back towards chest. And we're going to continue in that direction for 5 up to 10 reps. Now we started with 4 points, which makes a square. As you're going through this, I want to slowly smooth that square out into a circular, more of a circle, making sure that it is not painful. And noticing the areas in which it might feel clunky or a little crepitous. Like if you got a little crackly going on, as long as it's not painful, I kind of want to go through and get a little decrackle of the crackle. And I definitely want to take notice of where things feel different on the right side compared to the left side. You can also add in a little jaw movement, opening up your jaw nice and big, moving it side to side, noticing if there's any stretch related to the jaw and the neck. Maybe you feel your neck get stretched a little bit more when you open your jaw. That's a really good thing to notice. Then we'll come back to our center point and we're going to reverse directions. Now I'm going from center, left ear to left shoulder. I'm staying shallow again. Eyes go to the ceiling, right ear to right shoulder, and then chin to chest. And again, as we're doing this, we are slowly smoothing out those 4 points into more of a circular pattern. As we're doing this, I want to make sure that we're keeping the shoulders actively reaching down. It's real easy for the shoulders to want to start to kind of slough up. But what that will do is it will prevent you from getting into some of those deeper ranges of the neck, and it will kind of prevent a little bit of the assessment that we need. Sometimes the shoulders come up to avoid something that's uncomfortable. So I'm kind of taking the shoulders down and then out of it to really expose the neck, which is the reason we want to start shallow. So I want to be able to feel, oh, that is super tight right there. I want to stay on the juicy side of it, not the painful side. But I want to get that good sense of comparison. How does my head move when I rotate in one direction compared to the other direction? And noting specific patterns of like, it's tight right here can be really helpful, especially when there's other pain issues going downstream, such as into the shoulder. Again, if we need to shake out the arms a little bit, we can. We're going to come back into our inverted position, bringing feet back in front, nice grounded, spiraled elbows, open chest. And now we're going to start to lift up through the hips. So I'm pressing into the heels to lightly lift the hips off the floor and then bringing them right back to the ground. I want to stay spiraled here. I'm grounded through the palms, elbows are spiraled out, chest is open and lifted. As I lift my hips, I have to be able to maintain that position. I don't want to lose that, I don't want my shoulders collapsing up towards my ears. This is not the position I want to get into right now. I want to have hips off the ground. I want to be able to stay spiraled out and pressing down, letting the hips back down to the floor, and then slowly lifting them. With each one, we can start to work. Can we lift the hips up a little higher? Again, maintaining that packed shoulder. I don't want my shoulders as I'm lifting up, I'm trying to prevent them from rounding forward. And it's not that if they round forward, it's a bad thing. I want to assess to see if I can maintain that packed shoulder through this range of motion, which is going to be fairly important if we are working on programming a shoulder that is dealing with pain or instability. So I'm working on the stability side before we start working on the mobility side of this movement. If this is not a painful movement, if this does not feel stressful, as we drive the hips up, we can also continue to press into the palms, lifting the sternum up even higher. That's going to open up the chest more. It's going to create kind of a nice stretch through the chest. On each one, it should feel good and juicy, not painful. Very important to only move up to the progression that your body feels comfortable with and not take it into a painful progression. So letting the hips come back down softly to the ground. Again, if you need to take some pressure off the wrists, shake them out a little bit. Last little bit we're going to do. We're going to lift the hips up. I don't want to lift them high right now. And we're going to do some shift. So I'm going to let my hips shift from one side to the other side. And note as your hips shift how that changes the load in that shoulder. And just like what we did earlier, as you shift to that shoulder, I don't want to lose that shoulder stability. I don't want collapse. I want to be able to maintain that downward pressure through the shoulder. And if you can, we can start to, as you shift your weight onto one hand, you can lightly lift the other hand off the floor, bring it back down, ground as you shift to the other side. Again, I want to maintain that active shoulder as we're going back and forth. All right. Go ahead and shake the arms out. Now we're going to come back and reassess our kick through. So we did a lot of posterior shoulder work. We didn't do a lot of quadruped position work. But what we did through that shoulder area is hopefully going to bring some activity into that scapular area, and you're going to feel a little bit more stable going through our kick through. So spreading fingers nice and wide, grounding palms, extended elbows fully without locking, lifting the knees off the floor, and nice little rotation in the hips, feeling that weight shift from one hand to the other hand. If that's feeling good, stable, non-painful, as you shift, you can start to lift one hand, reground, and shift to the other hand. And again, if that's feeling good, if you're able to maintain that stable shoulder, then we can start to thread the foot through as we go from side to side. Again, I'm more concerned with going slow and smooth. I want efficient movement than going fast. And if this is feeling pretty good, and you got good control of the shoulder and you're not experiencing pain, we can slowly start to build this out, reaching further and driving that opposite hip up to the ceiling. Again, this transitional movement opens up other really interesting movements. I'm a little sketchy on this left shoulder here. I can get to here, but it's right on my edge. So I'm not going to take that movement any further. But going back and forth up to that edge feels really good on this shoulder. And this is a lot of, like I said, a week ago, my shoulder was more painful than it is today. Part of the reason it's feeling better is because I've been working these movements pretty regularly each day, just a little bit, but it makes a big difference in regaining shoulder function related to some old issues that I have in my body. So let's come into a nice, comfortable, seated position. And you go ahead and close your eyes. We did a good amount of work today. It was a lot of work getting into our neurology. So real important, take some nice deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you inhale in, letting that breath drop down into the abdominal region. I don't want to just breathe forward into the belly, but also out into the side body and into the low back, kind of getting into that crocodile breath, that 360 balloon breath. And as you exhale, draw your navel all the way into your spine. And as you're bringing in this breath, we're going to notice some of the movement that naturally takes place into the body. As you inhale, expanding into that crocodile breath, notice how your pelvis tilts forward and your body kind of naturally gets tall and erect. And as you exhale, drawing navel into spine, notice how your pelvis lightly scoops and your spine softly rounds, shoulders kind of come forward. You can even allow that movement to accentuate just a little bit, getting nice and tall, reaching the top of your head to the ceiling on that inhale, spreading your chest wide, lifting the sternum. And then as you exhale, scooping the pelvis, allowing the shoulders to round, head can drop, pulling that belly button in. See if you can start to feel a rhythmic wave-like pattern of your spine moving around your breath. It's a good place to kind of check in with your body. Notice if anything is speaking to you. Do you have any tension, any alarms going off, any fatigue, any areas of density or restriction? And I don't want to do a whole lot with that information other than just breathing softly into it, bringing a focus of breath in, letting go whatever needs to go on the exhale. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes.